guys, it's Kira, and today we're going to DIY a dragon egg together. And this tutorial is going to be more of an outline sort of, because I think you should use a little bit different materials than I did, because I just used what I had to make this one, and then the red one is the one that I made in this video. I did drop it on the floor though, so don't do that, it's super fragile and you'll lose scales. But we are starting off with this one. This was the first one I made, but I want to make the next one a little bit better, and I think I can do better by making these scales smaller on this next one. So we're going to start off with the materials. You're going to want a cup or a glass, styrofoam egg from a local craft store, some water, and some clay, but you should probably use like quick drying clay would be my best guess, because this is just what I had. This is definitely not the right clay to use, but you're going to start with just putting your egg upside down in your cup, and make sure it's upside down. You want to start with the bottom first. That is super important. And then you're going to take a tiny little piece like this and turn it into a triangle. And only one side needs to look nice, and on the ugly side, put some water to make sure it sticks really well. Put the pointy part of the triangle facing inward or facing down, since this is the bottom, just like this. And make sure to like really smash it on there so it's sticking well. You're gonna keep adding pieces until you make sort of a ring shape, and you want to keep them as tight as possible so that there's nothing in the middle. I made mine too big, so I had to add an extra piece in there to make it a full circle like this. Once you have your first ring, you're going to start working on the second ring. You want to place the second ring in the spaces in between the ones that are already on there, not directly on top. So you'll kind of see as I go what I mean by this, and make sure also to like flip it upside down and make sure they're all pressed on nicely and they're not going to fall off. But you're going to make that second ring, and they're going to be kind of spaced out based on where the spaces are between the first ring, if that makes sense. So this is a better view of like it's in between the spaces, not directly on top. And those spaces that you have here are going to be filled in. So you see how these are all in the same ring, these three, and then those two are spaced in between them. Always going to get them perfectly in between, but you try to do it the best you can. And make sure also to try to make them kind of pointy, because once you press them on there, they do kind of become rounder. And then you're going to want to try to keep track of what ring you're on the best you can. It's going to get a little messy. It's going to get a little confusing which ones go with which, but just constantly trying to layer them in the spaces in between them is going to be super important to just giving it that dragon feel. And you're just going to keep adding ring after ring, and there should be some spaces in between them, like you see here on mine there is, and you're just going to keep filling those in and filling those in until it kind of looks like an acorn, in full honesty. Try to keep the rings as centered and even as possible. Again, not always gonna go the way you want it to, but just do it to the best of your ability and it'll still look good. I mean, my bottom is a little bit off center, but it still looks pretty good. Still looks like a dragon egg, and you just keep adding and adding. I will admit this does take a long time, but you can see here I got to the bottom now, and this was my cousin's. I got to the bottom, I actually let it dry for a couple hours and took a little break, because that took a lot of time. So it's had some time to dry, but it's not totally dry. You flip it upside down so you can start doing the top, and I watched How to Train Your Dragon while doing it because so fitting. And then you just keep adding pieces, but the pieces are going to be smaller and smaller, and now the pointy part is going to be facing downward, obviously, since you flipped it. And then you just keep adding rings with smaller and smaller pieces until you fill it in all the way to the top. There'll be some pieces that are a little bit lumpy, and you can kind of just press those down together and kind of mush them all together, because it shouldn't be 100% dry yet. But then once you do, you're going to want to dry it, and I had two different drying sessions. So you can see here I let it dry overnight and the top is all dry, but then when I flip it, the bottom isn't. So I have to give it another drying session so that the bottom can dry too. But there are going to be some cracks because I used the wrong kind of clay. This is not the kind of clay you're supposed to use. But low-key, I think the cracks look kind of cool. And then once it's done with the second drying session, you're going to move on to painting, and whatever color you choose, I would recommend mixing a black with that color to give it kind of like a dragony feel. I'm not gonna lie, the painting is pretty tedious, so I start with a bigger brush and just kind of like paint overall general, but you're not going to get all those little crevices that you need to get. You're going to get some, but there's still going to be a lot left over. I'm not gonna lie, it does take a very long time. Then you're going to switch to a smaller brush to get into all those cracks and crevices, because there are a lot of them. I know you can't see necessarily all of them in this video, but in real life I could see them so well because of the good lighting in that room. If you're a perfectionist like me, this might get annoying. You don't have to do all of this. I'm just such a perfectionist. I wanted to get every little crack and crevice that I could see just because of the way the scales are laid on top of each other. But eventually I was able to flip it and do the bottom and then let that dry. And I just decided there were enough crevices covered and it was all good and done. And I did a second layer of paint just cause, and then you can do something to kind of seal it in. I didn't, just cause I like the way it looks right now. But definitely would recommend probably doing that. But I think my second one turned out a lot better than the first with the smaller scales, so I'd recommend doing smaller scales just because I think it looks cooler. But thanks for watching, hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day and don't forget to subscribe.